interested as well. Like, if this is all about money, I get it if you're a Koch brother.
Mm.
What about the guys who are running the think tanks? Because they're not going to be worth tens, hundreds of millions of dollars. Do they just become useful idiots, or what's in it for them? Like, let's say an imaginary think tank in New Zealand. Let's call it
Yeah.
the Pax Tayers Union. It's a made up imaginary place. If someone was to run that and be, associated with, funded by, advised by this group, which was the Natless network, what's in it for that person or those people running that? Is it they it's still about money for them? They just get it's a salary, because the Koch brothers might make tens, hundreds, billions of dollars, whatever. But what about the guys on the bottom?
It's a good question. It's one that I don't like to speculate on too much because for me, what I do, my job is to tell the truth, to find out the truth, verify it, and then tell this truth and make it public. What I want out of life is, very different. Like I don't want the barrier reef to die. I want the rivers to be able to drink the water from the rivers and to, for them to be full of fish. I want my children to be able to enjoy living on Earth. But these things are, I don't know. I guess it must, I mean, if I were to say anything to that, I would just say there's something about the thrill of actually causing events
Right.
to happen and, thwarting your enemies.
The
And
the
it's much more than if you're
the
like,
power, maybe that would be the power of being the person that helps to change public opinion, that word you used earlier, and then that would obviously turn into potentially other employment opportunities, like working in Simeon Brown's office, and that could flow down. You become a player in the world of politics.
yeah, I mean, they're very carefully trained and vetted. You know, So if we look at some of the key players in New Zealand, Mr. Williams, who, hi Jordan, if you're watching, we're great friends. Um, anyway,
I didn't mention anyone by name, Jeremy. I just
well,
had an imaginary union that came off the top of my lips.
again, we should probably call it the not New Zealand non-taxpayers non-union because one, it's they just like to disguise themselves in the language of national interest.
Yeah.
But how is it in New Zealand's national interest to upend the treaty? How is it in New Zealand's national interest to overturn the Resource Management Act? How is it in their national interest to reverse all of the progress that was made in the previous government about decarbonisation, the moratorium on oil and gas? It's not in New Zealand's interest. That's in the interest of corporate profit making. And a lot of that will be non-New Zealand capital that's invested in the country or hopes to be invested in the country.
But
But the other thing,
the other thing about the profit, though, that's interesting about the profit is we're talking about these companies with trillions or hundreds of billions of dollars. What's an extra $10 billion that you can earn out of ruining a country's foreshore and seabed? It's like, I remember, I think it's Mr. Burns off The Simpsons talks about you get to a certain amount of wealth and then after that it's just ivory back scratches. That's I mean, if you've got billions, you don't need to now ruin the lives of other people by wrecking their fisheries and to get a third billion on top or whatever it is.
again, I have no idea because I've never been rich, so I don't understand why they. But I think in the case of New Zealand, I think it's less about direct profit interest, perhaps, because yes, you do have offshore oil and gas. Yes, you do have possible seabed mining opportunities. These things are highly resisted, and particularly, we're seeing now there's litigation on the basis of Waitangi rights from traditional owners, Maori traditional owners in the Northland, using their rights as Indigenous people, and within the treaty, but also under international human rights law to block new projects. And the fact is that New Zealand, the point I think is often may well be that the point is that we cannot allow any resistance to be successful. So if we see,
So squash everything. Squash any kind of back chat, any kind of pushback must be squashed, because that could be the
that's a
starting
bad
of something
example. If
that could go on.
New Zealand can block offshore gas, then maybe other countries might try it. If New
Right.
Zealand can institute a kind of plurinational, bilingual, post-colonial state where the Indigenous people have an equal partnership with everybody else, where they're respected, and most importantly, where, like, if we look at, you know, what they want is just pure property rights, and in pure property rights, that includes the ability to destroy land. Right?
Right.
It's my property. I'm going to destroy it. I'm going to cut
Yeah.
everything down and poison
Do what I
rivers.
want.
My property. Whereas Indigenous collective title is the antithesis of that. It says this is our land. It's always been ours. But more than that, we have. It's not ours in a possessive sense. It's we have the obligation to honor our ancestors who cared for this country, and to pass it on abundant and clean and pure and not sullied to our descendants. This is the opposite of the worldview that they want. And so when you see things like, that also that your country has set the tone for, compared to Australia, which is just shameful how far behind we are on this stuff. You have the Whanganui River is a person in law, a person with rights. Now, this is terrifying to the fossil capitalists, because the idea of a sacred, non-negotiable protection of the environment, well, what they want to do is, privatize everything so they can,
Do what they
exploit
want.
and destroy that
Yeah.
country. The same thing with the atmosphere, same thing with the waters, same thing with the privatization of the water system. You've seen